Okay, well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. This webinar will be facilitated by staff from the Seattle Office of Labor Standards, also known as OLS. Our goal today is to provide you with general information about our office and give you an overview of the Community Outreach and Education Fund, also known as COEF, and answer any immediate questions you might have regarding the application process for the 2023 request for proposals. Next slide, please. So once again, thanks for joining. My name is Jennifer Molina, and we're going to begin shortly, but also just wanted to give you a heads up that this presentation is subject to Public Records Act, RCW 42.56. We ask you that you please keep your camera off and mics muted for the duration of the presentation. And if you have any questions during the duration of the presentation, please add them to the chat, and we will work with, with each other to answer them. Next slide, please. We want to start with the land acknowledgement, and we are on the land of the first people of this region, the original stewards of this land, past, present, and future. With gratitude, we honor the land of the coast, Salish, Duwamish, Issaquamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot tribes. Next slide. Okay, so today, by the end of this webinar, you will be walking away with a general overview of the Office of Labor Standards, our mission, what we do, an understanding of the COEF, Theory of Change, and again, COEF, Community Outreach and Education Fund. That's what it stands for. Our values and RSGI commitments for race and social justice commitments, application process for the 2023 request for proposals, and obviously answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. Some of you are familiar with our office, but the Seattle Office of Labor Standards, OLS, our mission is to advance labor standards through thoughtful community and business engagement, strategic enforcement, and innovative policy development with a commitment to race and social justice. The COEF partners, with local communities where we aim to create effective outreach and education programs. A lot of you are familiar with this, with our program, and we really appreciate it. So today, any questions you have regarding, the COEF process or what we do, again, please continue to put them in the chat, as I know that some people might be new to this process. Next slide, please. So the Community Outreach and Education Fund, our purpose, right? This brings us to the community. The reason why we call it, Community Outreach and Education Fund, the COEF. The fund builds capacity in community organizations to provide labor standard services to priority workers. The COEF is part of the OLS Theory of Change. To have effective enforcement of laws, we need to build partnerships with community organizations who can then teach workers about their rights and help us build trust within the communities using the methods that are centered around their community. They are culturally relevant and accessible, and obviously, they have like language-specific needs that that we're able to meet together. Next slide, please. So at the Seattle Office of Labor Standards, we started with only in a few years, we've gone from 4 to 10, and now we're just losing track of how many labor standards we have. Pretty much, we cover a range of protections, including paid sick and safe time, minimum wage, wage theft, first chance employment, hotel worker protections, secure scheduling, domestic workers ordinance, commuter benefits, a new one that is the cannabis employee job retention, also independent contractor protections, the app-based worker minimum payment, and app-based paid sick and safe time. And once you start working with us, you'll hear that we have a lot of acronyms, for this ordinance, because they are a mouthful. So we'll be going through, as you work with us, we'll be also working with you to ensure that you do have a full understanding of each of the ordinances that you'll be working with. Next slide, please. So OLS priorities. Our priorities is pretty much to establish, inclusion demographic data is collected from workers, surveys, and include low-income and historically disenfranchised communities. This includes people of color, immigrants and refugees, women, veterans, people with disabilities, and the LGBT community. Next slide, please. So about the fund. So this brings us to the reason why this fund was started, right? And we are here to pretty much go into it. And now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Angela Smith, who's just going to go into pretty good detail into everything that the fund is expected to do. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Jennifer. Again, yes, my name is Angela Smith, the Office of Labor Standards. So I have a few slides to share with you. One is about the funds. So these funds were created in 2015, the same year that the Office of Labor Standards Office was created. This current funding cycle is for 2 years, 24 months, from 2024 to 2025. There is a total of $3 million proposed, 1.5 million funded for 2024, and likely the same amount will be allocated in 2025, depending if the city funds the budget, which they usually do. Next slide, please. So what do our COEF partners do? Our partners help with doing workers' intakes, talking to the workers to see about issues or potential violations that they may have been subject to as far as their workers' rights. Our partners also lead trainings and workshops for the community that they serve. This could be in-person training, one-on-one, meeting in a virtual space, or offering language learning materials about labor laws to help workers understand, get a better understanding about their rights. Lastly, we're also trying to build capacity. This is one of the primary reasons why the funds are allocated to the community groups to help OLS extend our reach to the vulnerable workforce and low wage workers. Next slide, please. Here's some data from 2023. Currently, we have 9 organizations. They have met with 13,069 different type of interactions and trainings and have done 548 intakes. One of the goals again here is to spread the word about the COEF partnerships that represent the communities. We feel like OLS aren't always able to reach these communities, and so that's why we partner with the vulnerable workers, high risk and domestic workers. Our community partners also help increase referrals from employees to OLS, allowing us to take a deeper dive into personal labor situations. Next slide, please. Settlements. So another term for settlements is called financial remedies. The stat that you see here is from both for-profit and nonprofit. This means that OLS assisted in recovering this dollar amount for employees. This is the amount to date for this year. OLS is considered a very efficient government agency. We investigate all employers, for-profit, nonprofit, and even city departments. When you have a chance, please explore our OLS website. There's a dashboard that has a lot of this data on it for the public to view. And here I'm just going to highlight a quote from one of the workers that we were able to provide settlement for. And it says, this settlement is a big win for not just me, but for all workers, especially student workers. A lot of people are taken advantage of in the workplace simply because they are not aware of their rights. This settlement proves that workers can speak up for themselves without fear of losing their job and not being able to find work in the future. Next slide, please. So the Seattle Office of Labor Rights of Standards has race and social justice objectives. These objectives are applicable to every city department. And what we want to highlight, what the objectives that we have, we hope that they align with your work as well. We want to support community organizations that are most impacted by the labor standards. We want to build a culture of networking that's relevant to our community providers. We also want to engage the most impacted labor standards and make sure that people can come into community spaces, use language specific for the communities that they serve when they're doing outreach. We want to leverage opportunities that work to eliminate race and social justice inequities and encourage collaboration. And lastly, we want to be open and transparent about communication between OLS and our partner organizations about barriers, progress, best practices, and lessons learned. Next slide. Supporting our community organizations. So how do we measure this? COF partners provide feedback on how engagement is going. We also incorporate any of the city budget office requirements into the contracts when we're processing. Again, this is a 2-year contract. And then we also provide support with training materials and with training and materials throughout the year. We provide space for partners to engage and partners to talk about the scope of work with one another. Next slide, please. So engaging communities. We understanding where communities are most impacted. As community partners, your organization are better positioned to establish rapport with workers and develop relationships and trust building. When we're engaging community partners, we provide language access. OLS has a library of translated materials that could be used appropriately to help with language barriers. We also review personal stories and success stories. We also provide quarterly reports on the impact of being trained in folks' primary languages. Next slide. Thank you. Leveraging opportunities. So we collect data about outreach and training activities that address intersectional issues and how many trainings and languages used. We collect stories again about COF partners offering help for labor standards trainings. And then we also embrace COF collaborations within the cohort. Next slide, please. So we also want to be open and transparent with our communication. When we partner, we provide monthly summaries on one-on-one meetings about barriers, progress, best practices, and again, success stories. We offer space for peer engagement at our quarterly meetings, so all partners can come together. And lastly, we want to have transparent communication for OLS that disclose what challenges that there might be, and then also staff transition. Next slide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela. I'm Starberry. My pronouns are she and her. And so transitioning from the overview, what's new this year? This year, we're trying to create a space for organizations to focus on specific types of workers and the laws that apply to them, as well as the broad labor standards that apply to most workers in Seattle. We're also opening funding to organizations outside of Seattle. Next slide. Service strategy model. What does this mean? Organizations can choose to focus on a specific type of worker, for example, a retail and restaurant worker, or do outreach on all labor standards. Organizations can apply for multiple survey strategies. You will be required to submit separate applications for each. So why this change? As the city of Seattle continues to add more labor standards that apply to larger and disparate groups of workers, we'll address difficulties of the organizations to perform outreach effectively for all workers on all ordinances. The discrete service strategies allow for more organizations to be eligible for funding, expanding access to more community partners. And we'll address size and the contract scope of work done by community partners. Next slide. Organizations outside of Seattle whose main operations are outside of Seattle are welcome to apply. The organizations outside of Seattle must be able to show that their focus populations work within the city in order to be considered. And next slide. Timeline. The organization's deadline to ask questions is Tuesday, September 19th by 12 p.m. The deadline to apply is Tuesday, September 26th by 3 p.m. And there's an optional presentation from October 4th through the 6th, 2023. And you should receive a link to a calendar to sign up for the times once you apply. Note that the presentation will not be scored or worth points, but this will give you a chance to give more information about your application. And the decisions will come out around October 17th, 2023. Next slide. What do you need to submit? You will need to submit a cover page, responses to application questions, the proposed budget, consultant questionnaire, consultant inclusion plan, and contract exceptions, which are optional. If you want to download these documents, you can visit the 2024 to 2025 COEF funding page where each is available. We will also be sending out the presentation afterwards with clickable links. And Meredith, I think you might be able to post the link to that in chat. If not, I'll get that into chat. Please email ols_rfp@seattle.gov if you have trouble accessing the documents, and we will send them to you. And you will submit an Adobe form, which again, Meredith can paste into chat if possible, or someone can. And if not, I will make sure those get into chat. Next slide. Submitting questions and receiving responses. Again, the email is ols_rfp@seattle.gov, or you can call 206-256-5297 and ask for Meredith Rupp. Meredith will respond directly to you and try to help with any issues or questions you have. Questions and responses will be posted on the Office of Labor Standards website. And all applicants will have access to all of the same information. Next slide, please. How are proposals evaluated? There's an evaluation committee, and the committee consists of people from different city departments who provide points based on a rubric for each proposal. And the committee will meet to discuss and select the proposals. Not all of the labor standards specialists will be members of this committee. Rubric, available in full in the RFP, and Meredith will discuss a little bit more about that on the next few slides. Finally, final determination. The final selections will be made around October 17th. And now I am going to hand this over to Meredith. Next slide.
Thanks, Star. Appreciate that. I actually wasn't able to get the links into the chat because I can't see it right now, but we will get those links to you all when we're done presenting. So like Star said, my name is Meredith Ruff. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at OLS. I'm going to be getting into a little bit more detail about the rubric that we're using to score proposals. So what you can see, or what you will see in this presentation, is just a short breakdown of some of the elements that the committee will consider in the rubric. It doesn't have everything in it. We wanted to make a clear rubric so that committee members who are evaluating proposals have guidelines for how they're supposed to evaluate those proposals. Each question has a certain number of points attached to it. The RFP guidelines document itself has a fully broken out rubric. It shows each question, the subparts of that question, and notes how many points each subpart is worth. And then it explains how points are awarded. So I'm just going to get into it really briefly to do an overview. One of the questions is, who are you? Which is about your organization's capacity to submit invoices and reports that the Office of Labor Standards needs, and what your organization's connection to different workers and labor sectors are. Who will benefit is about your ability to meet workers where they are, which includes culturally relevant and language-specific supports. It includes that you have a clear idea of how you're going to increase workers' knowledge of their rights. And it includes that you have experience doing technical education with low-wage workers. That technical education experience does not have to be about doing legal education or education about labor standards, but just that you have experience doing education with low-wage workers. What do you want to do gets into your plan, your scope of work that you're proposing, how you're going to accomplish that work over the course of 2 years, and also your budget, how much money you're asking to be paid to do that work. The questions, how will it make a difference and how will you know if it makes a difference, are scored based on what you already know about the needs of the communities where you're planning to do outreach, and what you know about the barriers that these communities face in accessing support from the Office of Labor Standards. It also includes whether your work plan addresses those needs, and then how you are planning on collecting that data so that you can assess whether your programming had the intended impact. Then the last piece of the rubric is about women and minority business enterprise inclusion plan. I'm just going to refer to it as WIMBY. That's one of the many acronyms that we have. So the WIMBY inclusion plan is a new requirement this funding cycle, and we are having you all fill out that plan because it is required by city ordinance. What we're looking for is for everybody to just do their best filling out that document. I have looked at it. I know it's kind of confusing, especially for many of you who are nonprofits. Generally, nonprofits are not considered WIMBYs. And so what we're looking for is not you yourself to say, well, I'm a WIMBY, and so we're included in all the planning, but for your plans to hire women and minority businesses for any subcontracting. For example, that might be hiring a graphic designer to do some of your information or flyers, hiring printers for your information, hiring cleaning companies if you ever get food, kind of buying from WIMBY businesses when you do those things. So that's what that last piece of the rubric means. And then after selection, so you turn in all your documents on time, the evaluation committee accepts your proposal, and after you're selected, then what do you do with and for OLS? The first thing that you would do would be to negotiate your contract with us, and that is where we will get into like your specific scope of work and what you're receiving the funds for. One of the other things that we ask partners to do is to attend OLS retreats for the COEF cohort. We're planning on having one each year, and there will be kind of training and community building as part of those retreats. Partners are expected to attend monthly one-on-one meetings with contract managers, and you have now seen most of us at this point, so that's who you would be meeting with. Not all of us at once, but one of us. We have quarterly meetings with the whole COEF cohort, which we've discussed kind of the purpose of those. And then we also look for timely submission of invoices so that we can pay you on time, and reporting information, which includes data reporting, for instance, how many intakes you've done, how many trainings you've done, and then training logs, which just give more information about those trainings. We ask for a qualitative report every quarter, which just gives more description about your work. And then we are going to be asking for expenditure reports every 6 months. Expenditure reports are helpful for us so that we can look at them and point to them when we're asking for budget in the future. We do have examples of all of these reporting and contract documents. These sample reports are available at the end of the RFP guidelines, which we can share out and are also available on the website. Or in the case of the template contract, so you can see how it is that we would be writing down what you're planning on doing. Those are available on the RFP webpage as well. If anyone is interested and you write that in the Q&A, we can look at all of these documents after the end of the presentation. And then, yes, contact us. So I'm Meredith, I'm the procurement contact, so I am tasked with answering all of the questions about this request for proposal process. As Star said, you can call the number 206-256-5297 and ask for Meredith, and I'll talk to you on the phone about your questions. Or if you email the OLS_RFP@seattle.gov email, I am checking that mailbox multiple times per day, and I can answer your questions that way as well. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming and getting this information. And now we are going to open it up for questions. So I have to stop sharing. And I can see that Rebecca is already answering questions in the chat and has already put these links in the chat too. Thank you.
I think, Meredith, I only sent that to you so that you could answer out loud.
Great, that makes even more sense. Okay. But you did send the links to everyone, so thank you for doing that. And thank you, Star, for sending out the link to the form. So one of the questions that we got in the Q&A was about WIMBY. Again, that's Women in Minority Business Enterprise. And it says, do WIMBY contractors have to be state certified? The answer to that question is there are two ways that the city recognizes WIMBYs. One of them is by people self-identifying and registering through the city's online business directory. And then the other way is to pursue a state certification through the Washington State Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises. And Rebecca just shared more about the city's WIMBY policy as a link in the webinar chat.
All right, we have another question, which is, can you repeat what is new this year?
I can take that one, I think. So part of what's new this year is a service strategy model. Previously, we asked organizations to just try to do outreach for all of the labor standards. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, there are a lot more now than when the office started. So you can apply, for example, for a hotel workers service strategy model, and your focus will then be on the hotel workers labor ordinances. Plus, we call them there are 5 ordinances that cover almost every Seattle employee. So that would be like minimum wage, for instance. So your service strategy would be laws specific to workers, and then the ones that apply to almost everyone else, but not laws that are specific to other workers who are not included in your service strategy. The second piece would be that previously only organizations who were housed in Seattle could apply. Now you can apply even if your main area of operation is outside of Seattle, as long as you have connections to worker populations who work inside Seattle. And then the WIMBY inclusion plan is also something that's new this year.
All right. The next question is, how does OLS prefer applicants identify Seattle neighborhoods? By district, zip code, or by named area, i.e. Ballard, South Lake Union, South Seattle, etc.?
Becca, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I
usually...
don't. Sorry. I don't believe that we articulated exactly like a preference in the application. We will require zip code collection if one is selected, we would require a zip code collection as part of how we track our data, because that gets us to named area and district by just using the zip code. Well, mostly by district. Sometimes zip codes are split between 2 districts, but generally kind of that label. So I would prefer, I think probably zip code is best, but there is no restriction on just naming it by zip code or by neighborhood for the application process.
Thank you. And I can now see the questions. So thank you everyone for sending them to me before. We got a question about, is there an official definition of low wage? And I don't think so, but I'll let Rebecca answer that one too.
I don't think there is an official definition of low wage, but I know that enforcement uses, I think it's 200% below or 200% of the poverty line as part of their priorities for enforcement. So I think there's no hard and fast rule on this, especially in a place like Seattle where the cost of living is incredibly expensive. So it changes what low wage means here. So I think if your definition, if your focus population that you're hoping to do outreach to is kind of outside of what would typically be considered low wage, then it might be a good idea to address that and why that should still be a focus population.
The next question that we got is, can we clarify what we mean, the meaning of worker engagement goals as shown in the RFP? I actually can't find that in the RFP when I search for it. But
I
maybe
think it might be in the sample contract or the sample reporting documents.
Mm.
But generally when we talk about worker engagement goals, it's whatever the proposal is that you're like, whatever your proposal is for engagement. So if it's you're doing one-on-one conversations with workers in their home, then the worker engagement goals would be, we want to do 50 of these one-on-one engagements in a month. Or if it's, we want to have a cohort of folks in the same industry come together and be a working group, and we want to have one meeting a month, and we want to have at least 5 people attend that cohort meeting. It's really the worker engagement goals are based off of what strategies you think would be best to address the needs of the communities or the sectors that you want to work with and what your proposal speaks to. So that would be what worker engagement goals would be. You'd be setting those goals as part of the kind of larger conversation between the contract manager at OLS and the staff members at the organizations. When you're creating your work plan for the year, you might create benchmark goals for how to reach the overall goal for the year, so that you have kind of interim goals throughout the year as well.
Thank you, Becca. And I'm sorry to the person that asked that question. I now see exactly where you were talking about finding it. The next question is, for the optional presentation, is there a presentation outline / agenda, and who will we be presenting to? So who you would be presenting to would be the members of the evaluation committee who are available that day. The presentations would also be recorded for any other members of the evaluation committee. There isn't a specific presentation outline or agenda. It is a space for you to take and present and flesh out anything that you would like to from your application.
Just to like add to that, the overall like theory behind that is that some people communicate better verbally and orally than they do in written format. So this allows a different type of format to present the same or similar information as one would present in their written application, just to provide a different way to present the same information.
Thanks, Becca. The next question is, we know that some worker communities live well outside Seattle and commute into Seattle to work. How much information on the geographic area does OLS want, or does OLS only want demographic information and description of the workers? I would say we probably similarly want zip codes if we can get them. Because having that information is also really helpful for us in our office to do outreach and figure out, where people are coming from when they're coming to work in Seattle.
Yeah, if the goal of the organization's proposal is to do outreach outside of the city limits to workers that come into the city, we would want to know what the kind of geographic area that outreach is occurring in, and then also in that application really showing how they know that group of workers is working within the city of Seattle. You know, so if you have a group of workers that works in Tacoma and you know that they commute up into the city to work, that lives in Tacoma and comes into the city to work, you would just have to show how you know that is what they do. And that might just be the workers tell us this is where they live and this is where they work.
That is all the questions we currently have in the queue. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to ask them now. But if you're kind of sitting on some information, want time to think, you can email us. Oh, great. So one question is, are we allowed to create new material? If so, for creating language-specific material and outreach content, do we need to enlist the help of a certified translator? You are absolutely allowed to create new materials. Rebecca, can you help me on the certified translator? I don't believe so.
We don't require a certified translator, a certification process for the translations. We have a lot of community groups that will use folks in their groups that's their language, or they have a capacity to do translation there. We would ask that the work is kind of reviewed by several different people, engage in some sort of community review process just to make sure that it is being accurately translated, especially if that person's not a certified translator. But even if they're a certified translator, information that we get sent out to translate goes through a community review process as well. So it's just a helpful process.
Jennifer, would you like to add something?
You're muted.
Okay, I was saying that's a great question, and so that's something that we love when community partners do. And as a reminder too, that we always encourage our partners to put the OLS logo, right, in all new material you're creating. So these are the kind of things you'll be covering with your contract manager, your one-on-ones, and ideally anything that has the OLS logo, has to be approved, by the Office of Labor Standards. But when we say approve, it's such a, it's not a big process. It's just more that you are bring this up to us, so we're aware of what's circulating within the material. And then that is like, again, during those meetings, right, we're able to support you, and translation, that's a whole different thing. We might be able to support you with that, but with the materials, please, we always ask that you include the OLS logo. So, so that way, our community partners know that, we are working together.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for adding that context. The next question is, for our target audience, low-wage workers, when it comes to resolving their labor law claims, can you clarify the difference between formal and informal channels? Could you give an example of how each of these works? So informal would be, there's not necessarily a complaint or a case filed through the government. It might just be helping somebody reach out to their employer to try to get something resolved. So that's one thing that our partners do on their own, is they'll just help workers reach out to their employers and see if they can work something out, talk something through. That would be informal. A formal channel would be helping somebody file a complaint. At least that's one of the ways you can do it. We have complaints and enforcement at our office, so a formal resolution would be something like filing a complaint, seeing if it will be investigated. Our office does send letters out after each complaint is filed to the businesses telling them to comply with the labor standards, but it can move beyond that into an investigation, and can go up, to a settlement like Angela was talking about in the middle of the presentation. So more kind of formal, not court, but administrative processes that could eventually lead to more legal processes. And if anyone else wants to add on to that, please do. Hearing none.
I can't do a thumbs up
Becca,
emoji.
go for it.
React. Sorry, no, thumbs up. This is good.
The next question is, if we submitted proposals for multiple service strategies, i.e. broad-based labor standards and retail and restaurant workers, how are we going to be evaluated? Can an organization be awarded for both? So the short answer is that organizations can be awarded for both proposals. And each proposal would be evaluated individually using the rubric. Next question is, some of our team members were and are currently engaged on one or more City of Seattle projects. Should we also provide a list of project names and city officials working with our team members in addition to the team member's name? I'm guessing that's to avoid a conflict. Rebecca, thoughts?
Oh, this is a really good question. I might have to think about this one and talk to some other folks. I don't think that it would hurt to provide a list of the project names and the city officials working. That actually would be probably really helpful for us because we are recruiting for our panel within other city departments. And it would be nice to know if some of our recruited panelists might have a conflict of interest and not be able to serve on the panel. So that I think would be really helpful. I will have to contact a different department to figure out if it is mandatory versus just a really, really good idea.
Thank you. The next question is, earlier OLS mentioned working with 9 partners currently. How many partners does OLS expect to work with for the next 2 years? That question, oh yeah, go ahead, Jennifer, please.
That was next, then go ahead.
Okay. So that question, we don't have an answer. It really depends on how much money we get from council and then how much each project is budgeted for. Because there could be a situation where the committee scores. Do you want to finish, Becca?
I didn't want to cut you off. That's why I raised my hand.
If the committee picks a lot of projects and we don't have enough funding for that, then we just might not be able to fund as many as we would like. But yeah, Becca, please.
Because we are switching to a service strategy model this year, we anticipate that we might have many more partners this contract cycle. It really is, like Meredith said, dependent on how much money council allots us and what the proposals are and the scope of proposals and the amount of money requested in each one of the proposals. But again, because of the service strategies, we're kind of honing in on more discrete service sectors. So that might mean that we increase the number of partner organizations based on that theory of change. But there is no set number.
Thank you. I don't see more questions in the queue, but that doesn't mean that there aren't more questions bubbling up. So give it a few moments just to see if anyone has any others.
If someone would like to talk rather than write their question out, please just text me, please just chat me and I will give you mic permissions to turn on your mic.
Has anyone asked you for mic permission?
No.
Okay.
All right. We will be on here for a couple more minutes to answer any final questions. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
Okay, I think most of the attendees have left. So I'm gonna stop recording. We have one person that's still here, and that's fine, but I'm gonna stop recording now.